Generation X was stereotyped as a generation of slackers, aimless, unmotivated, and more interested in pop culture. Okay, see, this one here, I don't know, I kind of slightly agree with it. The birth control pill was approved by the FDA in 1960. There was a sharp decline of women remaining virgins until marriage soon after. And I mean, is anyone surprised by that? Today, your fellow Gen Z Brit is going to be checking out this video from BuzzFeed, which is going over some of the most key defining moments from every generation, starting from the greatest generation, I think early from the beginning of the 20th century up until Gen Alpha. If you love what I'm doing here on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on those post notifications. So please smash the like button if you guys want to see more of this. And as well, look, ways you can support me and go above and beyond if you love my content so much. Will be in the description to things like my PayPal, where you can donate to the channel, as well as my Patreon, where you can get exclusive bonus reactions. I recently did full album review of Prince's Purple Rain album. I showed my sister Prince. And I also am doing some 1980s sitcoms, one of them being Married with Children, and I do plan on doing a lot more on that Patreon. So if you haven't got in already, get in now while it's still hot. You know, things might start getting increased, that's all I'm saying. But look, guys, that being said, let's get straight into the video. Let's go! And guys, pay attention to the visuals if you haven't seen this video already, because the visuals are crazy as well. But there's going to be a lot of text on the screen. A generation typically refers to a group of people born within a certain period of time whose shared age and experiences shape a distinct worldview. We got like a soldier in the back. Following research compares and contrasts over a century of American generations. It's just a preference, yeah, this is going to be based in America for those of you guys are wondering. So I know it's a bit different to other countries, but yeah, this is going to be based in America. The Greatest Generation, aka GI Generation, born 1901 to 1927. Formative events: Great Depression, FDR's New Deal, World War II, and Pearl Harbor. So those are some key events. Silent Generation, 1928 to 1945. Formative events: Post-war American Dream, Korean War, Space Race, Moon Landing. I don't know, I still don't know what McCarthyism is, and Cold War and bomb shelters. This Silent Generation is an interesting one. Right after the Greatest Generation. Baby Boomers, aka Rock and Roll Generation, Generation Jones, 1946 to 1964. Forms of events: Vietnam War, protests, Watergate, Nixon resignation, Woodstock, Summer of Love, JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert Kennedy assassination. Like, those formative events are crazy for the Baby Boomers. I'm sure some of you might be able to shed light on it. Generation X, 1965 to 1980. A very interesting generation. Formative events: fall of Berlin Wall, end of Cold War, AIDS crisis, MTV music videos. Now that AIDS crisis one, look, you guys are gonna have to fill me in a bit on these ones, like give me a bit of context, but I know, I have a feeling what that's about, and I feel like it goes without saying, but it's to say, the fact that I didn't realize it was a crisis back in the days. If any of you guys could shed light on that, I would love to know, especially. But I know of MTV, like, you know, TV's coming into play now. Millennials, Gen Y, 1981 to 1997. They get a lot of hate, these guys. Formative events: 9/11, Obama election, Great Recession, rise of global internet. That's real stuff. Shout out to the millennials, man. Generation Z, not Z, aka my generation. The founders of iGen, Homeland Generation, Post, Plurals, Regen, born 1998 to 2010. Formative events: global terrorism, Trump election, Brexit, social media narratives, YouTube, and the digital content. Now, I can personally attest to the YouTube, being a Gen Z doing YouTube and digital content. I grew up with it, and Brexit, being in the UK, leaving the EU, that's changed things. But yeah, like, this is Trump election, all of the stuff right there, man. I can definitely see. It's said that the Greatest Generation, it is said of the Greatest Generation that they created modern America from sheer force of will and decades of hard work. Wow. That's the World War I and II grind, man. In response to the generation before them, the silent generation overwhelmingly wanted to work within the system rather than against it. Wow. They did not want to be seen as disagreeing with the government. Okay, so what do they mean by that? So the silent generation didn't want to go against the government. Obviously, the generation that came before them was the greatest. They kind of built the fabric of America through the wars and stuff like that. But then this generation didn't want to go against or disagree with the government for, I'll be interested to see the reasons why. Obviously, a lot of them were born just before World War II, or up to the end of World War II. And I guess they would have been coming during a time where there was still a lot of political stuff going on or something like that. And like, I don't know, I would love to know a bit more of the context, but it's interesting stuff, man. Baby boomers, on the other hand, were deeply involved in the civil rights movement and were motivated to change the world. Right, civil rights. They were the largest generation before millennials. They reached their peak in 1999 of 78.8 million people. Who would have thought? Generation X is seen as the middle child generation, squeezed between two large generations. Fewer Gen Xers say their generation is unique than either millennials or baby boomers. Now, I've heard my parents say stuff like that before, that their generation is unique. I've heard a lot of things about Gen Xers talking about how they like to be left alone. I hear a lot of tension between millennials and baby boomers because they're bigger generations. Also, and they have a lot of tension between the two. And Gen X, like that middle child, like they said, that doesn't really get involved, but they're doing their own thing. Well, you guys let me know if you agree or disagree with that stuff right now. I've heard my parents say stuff like that. In 2016, millennials overtook the baby boomers as the largest living generation, projected to reach their peak in 2046 with 81.1 million people. That's a large generation, man. Compared to older generation, they are less likely to take part in marriage, religion, the military, and political parties. Now, I don't know what it is with a lot of these kind of political narratives going around nowadays, but I can definitely see a decline in like religious kind of the religious bedrock that seems to be embedded into a lot of societies up until recent, which seems like it's been like just deteriorating to a degree, with a lot of people just doing what they own, like new ways of thinking, right? Marriage as well, people getting married a lot later in that millennial generation. Even in my generation, it's become more of a thing. And then the whole military and political parties, they're less likely to take part. I mean, when you live in a world where things are so comfortable and you got all the convenience of nowadays technology, and the threat of war isn't as much as it was back then, I could also see them also being not caring as much. I don't know, what do you guys think? Generation Z is predicted to be more hardworking and anxious than millennials, due in part to growing up in a post 9/11 and recession world. That's interesting. I would like to agree with that. They are the first generation to not remember a time without internet, smartphones, or social media. Now, guys, I can just say, yeah, I literally, when I was young, I remember growing up with phones already in the picture. The internet was already a thing. I don't remember the time without the internet. But I can say that having Gen X parents and some friends with millennial siblings, we definitely, like a lot of Gen Zers are definitely aware of some of them, at least a decent amount of things that happened before we were born. And we were raised by people that had that life before. So it's kind of interesting to see now, like, you know, as a Gen Zer, I'm very much in tune with the online world and my parents aren't as much. And to kind of get that interaction where I'm having to teach them a lot of things about the internet, and having my Gen X parents not also being able to integrate as well into this new time and age, not understanding things. So that dynamic is always interesting. But yeah, definitely social media and in the internet has definitely been something that I have only known, and I don't know what life was like without it. That's why I'm so curious to see what it was like before. The population demographic of the Great Generation was rapidly shifting to become more urban and agrarian, which makes sense. Times are changing. However, even then, 1 in 3 Americans still lived on a farm. The silent generation was described as brave and fatalistic. Wow. They went on to popularize the idea of a midlife crisis and made divorce more common. Now, the silent generation, midlife crisis, they popularized the idea. Why were they so fatalistic? Like, what would have happened during that time? Like, obviously, they would have just probably grown up during World War II. And their parents would have been probably heavily involved in those wars. So I can see coming from that, and then you had the, you know, like political stuff going on. I can see why during their period, like they got to go for a lot, to be fair. The 2016 election may have been the last presidential election where baby boomers and previous generation cast the majority of votes. 2016 as well. The visuals, man. Generation X was stereotyped as a generation of slackers, aimless, unmotivated, and more interested in pop culture. Okay, see, this one here, I don't know. I kind of slightly disagree with that. I don't know. I have, from my perspective, Gen X parents, like they definitely weren't slackers or aimless or unmotivated. But then I have a feeling maybe that's something to do with how like my parents migrated to the Western countries. I think maybe that's more centered at Gen Xers that maybe were born here type thing. I think it's a bit different from, like, let's say the Americans, for instance, that moved to America. But that's something that I'm very curious to see what you guys who maybe Generation X may think about that. Because I do hear a lot of stuff like you guys are very independent, you have to grow up fast. But then when I also get presented with information like this, saying that you guys are slackers, aimless, unmotivated, I would like to say that isn't the case. But maybe some of you guys may be agreeing with this. I'll be very curious to know. In reality, they had a less traditional adulthood, but not one that was necessarily less successful. Although they entered the workforce during the Great Recession, millennials viewed their economic futures more positively than older generations. As of 2015, they surpassed Gen X to become the largest generation in the American workforce. Yeah, but then they're also a huge generation, so it's kind of like, it was going to happen at some point. 2015. Generation Z grew up with a black president and same-sex marriage as a constitutional right. That's facts. Because of this, they will likely take many social issues for granted. I hear it. They live in an increasingly multicultural and multiracial multicultural world and find that to be less of an issue than previous generations. Now, guys, I can say, yeah, that's definitely true. Obviously, I grew up to be told things like, this is what life was like. Racism was a thing and whatnot. But in my day-to-day that I'm growing up now, it's like interracial couples are so common, and you know, things are a lot more progressive, like less traditional in a sense, in terms of like same-sex marriages and all these things. That's more normal nowadays. And also, like, it's interesting as well because like I sometimes maybe might get like looks when like, I don't know, like it makes me interested to see like how people like maybe Gen Xers or even some baby boomers may view like that whole multicultural, multiracial thing, especially if like a lot of those Americans grew up during a time that was very like racially divided and segregated, you know, things like the Jim Crow laws and stuff like that in America. So seeing that dynamic with like that generation, with my generation, Gen Z, which kind of grew up away from those times, like it's interesting to see the difference in like perspectives. I wonder what you guys think of that as well. And I don't know about Gen X's in that mix. Generation Alpha, aka so this is the generation after me, 2011, 2025. The Great Generation was known for their community and nation building, from infrastructure-like interests to the rise of the suburban middle class. From the oldest member of the generation to the youngest, they were the largest leap in educational attainment in US history. I didn't know that. Generation Alpha is predicted to become the most formally educated generation in history, with the most technology at their disposal. And that's okay. Generation Alpha being predicted to become one of the most formally educated, I get why, because there's so much information. But I feel like when you're given so much information, I think what's also going to happen is a lot of them are going to be prone to misinformation and be having to deal with like different types, have a different set of problems of having to decipher through stuff on the internet. Like, I think that's going to be a big problem, not just with Gen Alpha. I think it's going to be with my generation as well, because we also did grow up with the internet. But I think less with my generation because we had parents that were more like prior to that. Whereas I think Generation Alpha are most likely going to be raised by millennials who are very much integrated in the social media world as of today, at least in America, from what I'm aware. Majority of them are, at least. So that's an interesting thing there. The silent generation had higher employment rates than both the great generation and baby boomers. However, 88% of women were not in the workforce, and the average age they had children was younger than any other generation, which makes sense. I'm pretty like women weren't really working like that in the workforce. Like I can't remember when were women allowed to vote? I have to get that timeline in. I thought it was that early 19th century. At least more official, or at least enter the workforce. But either way, also having children younger was a lot more common. Nowadays, there's this whole stigma of or this whole rhetoric of living your best life, and then maybe when you get to 30, then you're thinking of children. But I know for a lot of you guys maybe watching, that might not have been the case when you're younger, which is so interesting to see how things have changed. Some will say for the worse. Generation Alpha will be the first generation to be born entirely in the 21st century. Duh. Baby boomers lived in a time of sex revolution. The birth control pill was approved by the FDA in 1960. There was a sharp decline of women remaining virgins until marriage soon after. And I mean, is anyone surprised by that? I didn't realize the baby boomers are the ones that were really capitalizing on that. But it makes sense if it was 1960s. They would have been adults during this time, right? But yeah, the whole thing of not waiting until marriage is definitely not a thing nowadays. It's rare you get that unless you're somewhat religious, or you're just on a spiritual journey, or you're celibate for whatever reason. But yeah, it's interesting to see that how that's changed. Millennials, the parents of Generation Alpha, are increasingly having one-child families. Generation X was the first generation where women were more formally educated than men. Shout out to the women out there, man. 55% of startup founders were Generation X, the largest percentage of any generation. I didn't know that either. Millennials are twice as likely to have never been married than members of the silent generation at the same age. Millennials women are twice as likely to be in the workforce as women of the silent generation. So they're twice as likely to not get married at the same age, but they're also twice as likely to become more to be in the workforce type thing than the silent generation, which I don't know if they did that intentionally. That seems like a very interesting parallel to do. I don't know if they're trying to imply that, with women getting more into the workforce, it's because they have more of a ownership on a career, that there's less of a importance, or there's less of an importance on raising a family, which is interesting. And I have heard that narrative being pushed. And again, whether you fall on that side of the argument, it's definitely one that is up for contention nowadays. But yeah, that one makes sense. The best comparison for Generation Z is the silent generation. Okay. Both generations grew up in difficult and aftermath of economic and political turmoil. The racial makeup of America from the great generation to Generation Alpha or their birth by 2042, certain racial minorities will make up the majority of the US population. So as you can see, we got on the screens from the greatest generation. These were the demographics, the racial demographics of just the America. And you can see here, yeah, 0 to 1% mixed race. People aren't really mixing like that back in the days, right? But we could see that the minorities were a lot less. 83% white max potentially. That's very, very white, because it's so different now. Oh, sorry, I skipped. Obviously, this is for the silent generation. You're seeing still similar white. Not much has changed, to be honest. Not much has changed. Maybe more black, more Asian. Now in the baby boomers, now we got a lot less white in terms of overall percentages, more Hispanic and blacks, and still a little bit of a rise from Asian and mixed race. The Generation X, see, it's really changing now. 65% max on the white, Hispanic and Black and Asian. Like, at least it's all now starting to become way more diverse.
And what will she say?
In 2011, the majority of US babies were non-white minorities. Wow. Millennials, yeah, it's changing. And now with Gen Z, 3 to 5% mixed race. The rise of interracial marriages in the past decade has led to a 50% increase in multiracial youth. See, interracial marriages are so common nowadays. Even I remember having a discussion with my parents, and they were like, look, if you marry anyone, it doesn't really matter the race. Do you know what I'm saying? And they don't really mind stuff like that. And I know that's something that's a lot more common now. I think, obviously, maybe if you was born when you were a lot younger, maybe you guys can share insight on that. It definitely may not have been the case for you. Like, marrying someone that wasn't in your race could have been a big issue. Again, like, I do hear rhetorics on both sides. Some people feeling that that's not a good thing. Some people think that is a good thing. Me personally, I feel like love is love, right? But do you know what I'm saying? If you love someone who's another race, why not go for it, man? But it's to say, yeah, man, it's just so interesting how much things have changed. And I didn't realize, just like, look, it makes sense. I didn't realize how how less diverse it was. Because I grew up in a very diverse time. But this is in America, though. The Great Generation had the most veterans. Returning Model 2 soldiers dealt with the aftermath of war, including the shell shock, later known as PTSD. Now, that is deep, man. I feel so sorry for the Greatest Generation, because that's what, 2 world wars for a lot of some of them. Especially World War II, and that was a gruesome war, even more gruesome than World War I from what I've seen. And yeah, I feel so sorry for that generation. Bro, look at those visuals as well, though. Does that not just like give you goosebumps? Like what they've done here, like. No member of the silent generation has ever served as president. Wow. I didn't know that. Drinking marijuana and illicit drugs were used more by baby boomers than any other generation in their youth. Baby boomers, man. Generation X has incurred the most personal debts. Yo, they're really painting out baby boomers to be like very like hedonistic or leaning into that, and then Gen X is to be very like just lethargic, you know, and have like little to no care in the world kind of thing. At least with what's going on visually. I really want to know what you guys think of that, man. Most personal debts, is that true? More millennials identify as LGBT than any other generation. Yeah, I hear that. But they are also the one of the largest generations, so it's like, yeah, it's like there's more of them. Generation Z will likely become the most entrepreneurial generation ever. Come on, that's me right there. And I see it. I think Generation Z is gonna be a very, very influential generation for the mid to latter half of the 21st century. That's my prediction. Very, very influential. As of 2015, Generation Z had 49 million people. Millennials 75.4 million. Generation X 56 million. Baby boomers 74.9 million. Wow. In 2011, the US birth rate fell to a record low, indicating a potential long-term population decrease. I wonder why. You know, them birth control pills and all this contraception and all this abortions, like, you know that's got something to do with it, man. Like all this stuff going on nowadays. That wasn't a thing back in the day. As of 2015, the silent generation had 28 million people. As 2014, only 4 million members of the Great Generation. The majority of the Great Generation was religious, a characteristic that had declined over time. Millennials are significantly less religious, but are still as spiritual as previous generations. Spiritual. Generation Alpha also looks to the stars. Commercial space flight will likely become a reality. Yeah, okay. See that decline in religion or religious beliefs? A dream that was first set into motion by the members of the Great Generation. Over the course of 125 years and 7 distinct generations, social, political, sexual, and technological behavior have radically evolved. That's true. video. In your generation, in the end, your generation does not ultimately define you, but how you interpret your unique place within it. Now that is a quote to end the video. Now there were so many things that were raised in this video, so many interesting kind of concepts that I would love to get your opinion on. So whether you agree or disagree with these things, because this did come out 7 years ago, so I'm very late to it. I'll be very interested to see kind of how it has changed more so now with those updated stats. If any of you guys have any videos you could share some insight into, I would love to just kind of delve into that a bit more and get into it. But yeah, what did you think? Overall, it seemed like, you know, the Great Generation went through a lot of trauma, but they laid a lot of the fabric. The baby boomers or the silent generation definitely didn't want to go against the status quo, but they were also just kind of very fatalistic, you know what I'm saying, very down. Baby boomers seem to be very involved in like very hedonistic stuff, sexual revolution, and the start of the deterioration of a lot of these like, I guess, like marriages, like birth rates going down, and then the Gen Xers being the one in the middle that just, it was lethargic and just didn't really do much, lazy. You had the millennials that were very much just where you saw the deterioration of like a lot of traditional religious values and family values and social and political values. Generation Z, my generation, having a lot of prospects and potential for the future. And Generation Alpha also being one of those generations that are going to be, not much was said on them, but one of those ones that are going to be definitely influenced by the technology that is going on and how that influences things. But that's kind of been like a summary of what I got from this video. I'd love to know what you guys got from it as well, and whether you agree or disagree. And made this point, comment on a red heart so I know who my real ones are, who made it to the end of this video, who were also interested in this maybe as much as I was. I love all you guys that be supporting me on this journey and watching through to the end. I've got playlists of all these kind of reactions and more. So if you guys want to see more of this type of content, it'll be linked at the end of the video in a playlist you can check out. And guys, like with that being said, I've been your boy JayFlex. It's been generations throughout history, and for those guys who made this point, you guys have been absolutely wonderful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.